Our conference chair, thank you very much for that. Those opening remarks, extremely well received. And let me start from where you ended, which is the theme of how to change things and how to change our world. There are only two ways of changing a democratic government. One is through the gun, which is not, I assure you, what we're here to discuss today. The other is through the electoral system, by the exercise of the votes. And what I wanted to do today is to focus on and spotlight the extent to which that avenue of change, the peaceful change through elections, the extent to which that is actually open to our people. Because elections are organized, we assume that the keys are there, the direction of governance can easily be altered. They tell us that it's in our hands, take responsibility, come out and vote, they say. But what is the reality? You see, my suspicion is that because we've been on the same trajectory ever since so-called independence, and in fact, to say the same trajectory has been generous. We're on a different trajectory, a downward, desperate trajectory to destruction. And we're always assured that come out and vote, and the course will be altered. So let's discuss and let's explore the extent to which that is actually a reality. The thrust of this paper struck me on my last trip home as I was driving through Ekpe, and I saw the masses of our people, the vast majority in wretched condition, on the streets, walking. And it caused me to reflect. This is the electorate. The electorate is not you and I who are in our various establishments and occupations. We are not the mass. There's a reason behind that word, the masses. They are the electorate. And if we find that the masses, the great majority, are below the line in terms of their standard of living, their level of education, what impact does that have on the prospects of change through the ballot box? This is really what I want to discuss today. Now, I want to make it clear that this democracy thing, we somehow think that it's alien to us. But go to any village, I dare you, I challenge you, go to any village in Nigeria, and you see democracy in action, where the leaders are chosen by their people, by those who know them. And that is critical, because it's fundamental to choice that you know what you're doing. That when you're presented with a number of candidates, that you know those candidates, you know their capabilities and you know their antecedents. You see, in the village setting, people know those ones who are the children of vagabonds and thieves. And those ones could never be chosen and emerge as leaders. But you see, as the demos, which is the root of democracy, as the demos grows and the numbers increase, the capacity of the electorate to know the candidates, genuinely know them, is diminished. We on our platform, we're in dialogue and debate every single day. Through the discussions and the exchanges, we get to know who is who thinks one way, who thinks the other way, who's thinking we like and who's thinking we dislike. That is the knowledge that's at the roots of decision. But when we say that we have elections, come out and vote, what do those masses really have? Which is to be the basis of the choice that we're asking them to make. That is one dimension. The other dimension is the actual representatives. When the connection between the represented and the representative becomes so loose and weak, then there's no true representation. When the representative is living a completely different life, divorced from the reality of the represented, then it is not democracy. It is exploitation. So we have a situation where parliamentarians in the olden days were part-timers. Their reward from their role was the fulfillment of the desire to serve, rather than the bank balance at the end of each month. They had occupations from which they sustained themselves, rather than what the political system is going to put in their bank accounts at the end of each month. Once you're in a situation where your parliamentarians are paid by the establishment, by the system, and they're wholly dependent upon that remuneration, then you've made their representation compromised. It can never be true representation. The parliamentarians have been bribed effectively. And this is what we see when we see senators with remuneration packages in Nigeria of $500,000 per annum. That's the level of their remuneration. That is not a reward for service. That is a bribe. That is shut up your mouth, enjoy the ride, and all will be well. So where would the change come from in those circumstances? Similarly, at the root of democracy is supposed to be the media, providing the information, the know-how, the knowledge that the people need in order to exercise their votes effectively. But not only are the media outlets gagged in the same way as the representatives, because the advertising revenue that they expect from an overpowerful government means that just like the senators and the reps, they have to seal their lips. But even the ones who might find a way to let a story run, you find that the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation is slamming them with fines when they step out of line as far as the government is concerned. Then they simply buy up what remains. This is what I mean by vote buy. Now, it's interesting, Chatham House is the Royal Institute of International Affairs, who study the problems of countries like ours, problems that were legacy problems that were left behind by British colonial rule. And they come up with all sorts of papers where they've done the research, they've done the polling, and they say, here's the problem. And in 2019, as recently as December 2019, they identified a problem in the Nigerian political system. They asked the question, why do corrupt practices seem to be so resistant to anti-corruption efforts? With current focus on Nigeria, this project uses social norms methodology to provide evidence of those corrupt practices that are sustained by shared beliefs, which they called social norms, and those which are sustained by other drivers. And this is how they diagnosed the problem. They said, corruption in the form of the exchange of cash or gifts for votes undermines the integrity of electoral democracy and obstructs accountable governance. Well, we know that. They say research on vote markets tends to focus on its various forms and strategies for both vote buying by political actors. But little is known about the supply side of this market, i.e., listen to this, citizens' beliefs and expectations that could influence their decision to sell their votes, even in the context of a secret ballot. And they say, across Nigeria, vote selling is weakly socially conditioned, if at all. It is mostly driven by practical reasons, such as the need for the money or gift, the avoidance of political violence from party thugs, or the belief that the offer would be accepted by someone else, so rejecting the gift would not make a difference. So the thrust of their research findings is that vote selling is a cultural problem. It's just the way the people are. They don't think there's anything wrong about selling their votes. Well, the reality is this. That is a cock and bull story that Chatham House have put out, because they know very well the history of parliamentary democracy. They know it is not a cultural problem. They know that it's a financial and development problem and consequence. They know that because it's in their own history. As far back as 1783, December 1783, William Pitt the Younger, whose father, Earl of Chatham House is named after, he said this: the beautiful frame of government, which had made us the envy and admiration of mankind, in which the people were entitled to hold so distinguished a share, was so far dwindled and departed from its original purity, as that the representatives ceased in great degree to be connected with the people. This is the very same problem that I identified, the disconnect between the representatives and the represented. When the representative ceased to have connection with the constituents and was either dependent on the crown or the aristocracy, there was a defect in the framework of representation. My people, there's a defect, a fundamental defect in the framework of representation in our country that makes the election exercise a charade. The symptoms of the democratic experience in Britain at that time were exactly the same as the Chatham House report as pointed out in current Nigerian practices. The report showed evidence that some boroughs back then in England, in the lofty possession of English freedom, claimed to themselves the right of bringing their votes to the market. It was just a dumb thing. Let us look at the evolution of the franchise from the British experience. We have to look at it because they're the ones who set our ones up as part of the independence arrangements. You see, until the time Britain became the undisputed world power, We're not talking about Nigeria that thinks itself a giant. This was Britain back then, dominating the world. Who had the votes? The right to vote was limited to owners of freehold property to the value of 40 shillings. You can imagine what 40 shillings was worth back then, 1832. That is when they started opening the voting process. The detail of my paper, you already have it in the pack, so I'm not going to go through it in close detail, just the headline points. Do afterwards revisit the paper and take it all in. But the point is this: they know that the votes is toxic. It has to be managed very, very carefully. And people have to be in a position where they have the basics in place in order to be able to protect their votes. I found that in other Commonwealth countries like Kenya, Zambia, South Africa, wherever there was a settler community, there were restrictions on the franchise to protect the poor from their votes being captured and exploited. But in Nigeria, what did they do? One man, one vote, regardless of living standards, regardless of educational standards, dressed up as a liberal exercise. And so we have a situation where, despite the wealth of Nigeria and the oil wealth, more wealth in the country is producing more poverty in the country. And more poverty in the country produces more members of the electorate available to be exploited, whose votes can easily be taken from them. So they're using the impoverishment of the people to rob them of their genuine democratic say. If those resources were used to uplift the people out of their state of poverty, the people would then be exercising their votes as the democratic model always contemplated. So it is not in their interests. These parliamentarians on $500,000 a year, it can never be in their interests to exercise the votes. It's the same reason why they shut out the diaspora from voting, because the diaspora are not vulnerable in that way. So those who could stand back from the system and exercise the vote effectively, those ones are completely shut out. So I conclude, because I can see the timekeeper flashing me. As I said, the detail is in my paper, but the bottom line is this: voting is a grave civic responsibility that affects not only the current generation, but fundamentally shapes the legacy for later generations. It is for this reason that societies have long recognized the need to protect the integrity of the vote. We must protect the integrity of the votes of the poor and the uneducated. We must take that as our number one mission if we're going to have meaningful change in that country. Well, welcome back, everybody. I think, are we all back? Yeah. Well, it's been a long day, so I'm going to be short in my closing comments. What this exercise has demonstrated is the art of the possible. I'm not one that believes that things cannot be done. It only takes an attitude of mind to get things done. And that is the Fatherland way. That's what we've That's what we've demonstrated. In the group that I was just in, there was a lovely dialogue going on between a Biafran and a member of a northern minority, a Gwari, member of the Gwari ethnic group. Is in Fatherland that we can recognize and respect diversity in this way and get us in conversation, intelligent conversation. Harold Smith, who I regard as the patron saint, he and his wife, the patron saint of Fatherland, in his book that we hope to bring to you very soon, his unpublished memoirs, the Harold Smith story, he described colonialism as stealing another man's country. I've never heard a better definition of colonialism, the stealing of another man's country. Our countries were stolen. What has come through this exercise today is that we had systems that worked for us. They came and stole our countries and gave us this contraption in which everybody's legs have been tied, and our best minds have spent the whole day, and we're not alone, spending all our energies that should be used for creative purposes, trying to untangle the knots that have arrested our development. But we're going to get our nations back. What they stole, we're going to get back. Not just the physical Benin bronzes and all the rest of that. More importantly, the essence of identity, we're going to get it back. And this is but the beginning of the process. I want to thank all our, those who worked so hard to put the prepared papers together. Dr. Gabriel, Adewale, Adeoye, Emeritus Professor Nwanze, Chief Tola Adeni, Dele Abegunde, and all our discussants who responded to those papers, as well as our breakout participants that made the discussions so interesting. I want to give special thanks to those who made this conference possible, the organizers of the conference, Timothy Modu, Olade, who's not here with us today, Dele Ogun, the quiet, silent operator, Lara Oyedele, who stepped up to take responsibility at the last minute and kept us to time, and the conference chair, Kehinde Oluwo, a brilliant outing. Special thanks in that category goes to the incomparable Mr. Bonnie Uber, because when we were putting this conference together, we were going to hire a platform and they were going to charge us something like about £1,700 to use a platform to do exactly what you've seen today, whereby we're able to come together in the main room, get into the breakout rooms. All that technology was the work of Bonnie Uber. that made it happen, testing the systems, making sure that right from the registrations, the whole process, demonstrating the inherent ability and gift of our people, which has been arrested, that we don't need anybody, any experts to come and tell us how to do things. We've got the resource base within. As somebody said, all it requires is opportunity for our excellence to come through. I want to give very special thanks to our friend, guardian from South Africa, Dr. Biki Minyuku. Those of you who attended the last conference know the story behind when I say he's my namesake. He is selfless in what he gives to this group, the guidance. And what I take away from his contribution, there was a lot from all the papers, all the comments, but I know the enemies of progress are even here amongst us. So I'm not going to tell you which of the excellent ideas we're going to take forward, because they will be listening. But we will take some of those ideas forward because I've made notes of them. But what I can say expressly is in relation to what Dr. Minyuku said. When people say, what next? Are we just a talking shop? Nigerians love that. Just talking. Well, if this is just talking, let's keep talking. Because talking is good. It depends what you talk about. And if you're talking about the way forward out of this mess that we've been put in to arrest our development, then we can't talk about it enough. But Dr. Minyuku told us what Fatherland is doing. That we're turning disciples into prophets. Prophets of the change that we need. And he also said that the Fatherland psyche has to become the Nigerian psyche. That is so powerful because it's the way that we do things within Fatherland. Our disciplines, our commitments. When we say we're going to do things, we do it. And we do it well. We manage time, even at the expense of almost rudeness in arresting presentations, because those disciplines that have been lost in that Nigeria contraption, it is within Fatherland that we will restore it. So when Fatherland says an event will start at this time, know that it will start at that time. If we call on you to say, this event carries a charge, understand that what we're charging you is for the work of Fatherland. There will be events, of course, which are just free to the public. But every decision we make is purposeful. And I want to congratulate all of you who overcame the understandable, natural resistance to parting with the £20 that we were asking for. You demonstrated that you passed the test. It was a test because there were some, they want their freedom, but even that £20, they're not ready to pay for it. Those are the ones who are just talking. We didn't say it was a test, but you came through. But I have to say that some of you, with your late registrations, this is not the Fatherland way. Some of you left it to the last minute, despite all the publicity on the platform, You waited. The typical Nigerian way to say, let's see if it's going to happen. Let's see if it's going to happen. Well, we were ready to go forward, even if there were just 5 of us here. That is our attitude of mind. When we say something will happen, it will happen. And what we want to instill in us is the new way of doing things. Do what you like outside when you go to physical Nigerian events. But when you come to our Fatherland events, know that we're going to do things the Fatherland way. And we're not going to tolerate the kind of things that are tolerated in Nigeria at large. We have a next event. And you'll be relieved to say here that this one we're not charging. This one is like the 15th of January webinar, because some of our events, we're there to educate the people. We're a teaching center, we're a learning center. The next event is on the 29th of May. That is the Biafra event. There we're going to host the dialogue, the necessary dialogue between the members of the old Eastern region, the Igbos and the minorities, because I know that is another relationship that has been poisoned artificially. And we're going to get to the bottom of that poisoned relationship with a view to building a new constructive relationship, as we did between the Igbos and the Yoruba. Of course, it's not done, but we started a process. And as we did for the Igbos and the Yoruba, to extract that poison, at least to begin the process of extracting that poison, we're going to do the very same thing for the Easterners. I said it's 29th of May. Now, one thing those of you on the Fatherland group should know, that the date 29 is always very significant. All things bad that have been done to Southerners happened on the 29th. Think about the dates of the pogroms against the Igbos. 29th, 29th, and 29th. 29th of May, 29th of July, 29th of September. Think of the declaration of the state of emergency in the Western region, when the caliphates put Western, northern soldiers to take over control of the West. 29th of May, 1962. Now, why am I laboring this? Because just the other day, we heard the announcements about the elections for 2023. And what day was the announcement made? 29th of April. So those who are playing with us, those who are looking to 2023 as the avenue and the opportunity for the change that we're looking for, they're telling you it ain't gonna happen. All the dates that they could have chosen, the so-called Independent National Electoral Commission, it was the 29th, the favorite day of the caliphate, that they chose to announce when those elections will take place. But the good thing is that we can see it now. Within Fatherland, we can see it. And when we can see it, we'll say it.